So imagine you were promised something amazing, life-changing, and then they took it all away. That's exactly what happened to Abe Saperstein when he was promised an NBA team. And the NBA said, sorry. And so he got his revenge by trying to start his own league in the American Basketball League, creating innovations in 1961 that changed basketball forever. But you probably never heard of it. It only lasted for 2 years. Sadly, money, as it always is, was the issue. Join us today as we dive into the history of the American Basketball League in 1961, today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide, because my best basketball shot is a behind-the-back three-pointer. So, the American Basketball League was actually officially started back in the early 1900s. It's one of the first professional basketball leagues ever started. But as the Great Depression does, they folded because of money. During them, actually, Abe Saperstein did something quite amazing. He started the Harlem Globetrotters, and little by little, they became the greatest barnstorming basketball team ever. And still, to this day, one of the most entertaining basketball you can watch. And Abe was the founder and promoter of that team, and actually had that team beat NBA teams in the day. So he had a connection with the NBA, and he was promised after the Globetrotters did multiple doubleheaders for the NBA, and that goodwill he thought would give him an NBA team in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, NBA execs allowed the Minneapolis Lakers to relocate to Los Angeles, and because of that, Abe Saperstein's application was denied. Obviously, he felt betrayed, and instead of trying again for another team, as at that time the NBA only had 8 teams, it was hard to get a team. He decided, why not just start my own league? The NBA is not too big, I can't beat them. In fact, his Globetrotters had beaten the NBA before. So that's what he did. He started to think about this new league in 1959, working with the National Alliance of Basketball Leagues, owner Paul Calhoun and George Steinbrenner. Yeah, that George Steinbrenner, who had an AAU championship team called the Cleveland Pipers. And they together assembled more leadership groups to start teams and raise some money for some competitive salaries. Because if the salaries were competitive, they may be able to attract some big name players. And Abe knew about how to get players. He was able to get great players to play for the Globetrotters because the NBA had strict rules. You had to play 4 years in college to be able to play in the NBA. Well, one way you run that is you don't have college requirement rules. Instead, you take anyone who wants to play. And this really opened up the gates. And they decided to launch with 8 franchises in the East and West, really showing that they could compete with the NBA, who also only had 8 franchises at the time. And those franchises were the Chicago Majors, owned by Abe Saperstein, the Cleveland Pipers, owned by George Steinbrenner, the Pittsburgh Wrens, and the Washington Tapers. For the West, they had the Hawaii Chiefs, the Kansas City Steers, the Los Angeles Jets, and the San Francisco Saints. Now, what their plan was the ABL would build with local promoters. So it would have business owners and people that were from the area to really boost the team up because they knew the area, they knew the other businessmen, they knew how to get sponsors and recruit locally and attract veteran NBA talent to get fans to respect the league and want to come see them. And Abe Saperstein appointed himself the commissioner of the league. And he held substantial influence over the rules and the direction, and he also owned the Chicago Majors, which meant he had an in to push out the Chicago Packers, the NBA team in Chicago at the time, from their venue of the Chicago Stadium. So the American Basketball League held their opening press conference and declared the league would advance basketball in ways the NBA would dare not do. It would be the future of the game. They were focused on speed and scoring. And one way to do those two things was widen the lane, allowing big men to have to step out from the paint more and allowing shorter guards and forwards to get in the paint and score more, and also the innovation of the three-point shot. They set it at 25 feet, and this shot would be worth 3 points, allowing shorter players to score more and the score to be higher. And this one innovation would stick around and be the legacy of the American Basketball League. Though many saw these changes as gimmicks, but Abe knew a quicker, more fun game from playing with the Globetrotters would lead to more and more fans joining. So now they had their teams. They needed to get some players. Now, Abe didn't have the financial stability at the NBA at the time, so he was trying to be very strategic in his players. Now, at the time, NBA players were making roughly $15,000 a year, which is roughly $150,000 a day. Now, salary cap for the American Basketball League, and teams could pay whatever they were willing to pay. And sometimes it was even higher than the top NBA talent. Although we don't have the exact numbers, they were able to attract some pretty good players. Some of the key players that they were able to attract were Connie Hawkins, who wasn't in the NBA at the time. He was actually banned due to being involved in a college gambling scandal. And he would actually go on to excel, winning the MVP the first year, and would later be able to join the NBA after winning a title with the ABA, and would join the NBA and become a Basketball Hall of Famer. Then there was Jerry Lucas, who signed with the Cleveland Pipers, one of the top college and Olympic stars, who joined before he became an NBA All-Star and Hall of Famer as well. There was Bill Bridges, who played for the Kansas City Steers, who went on to have a successful NBA career after this too. And many others would eventually make the leap from the American Basketball League back to the NBA shortly after it folded. Now, to get these players, there was actually not a normal draft. This was a localized draft. You would get 2 territorial picks, enabling them to spotlight local college players and blacklisted talent, packing the roster with great athletes that were from the area that the area had already followed when they were in college. And then they would go for players that had been in the NBA or were fringe NBA players to join their league as well. And their draft actually took place in Chicago, March 19, 1961, over 1 week before the NBA. And this actually proved as a helpful strategy as they would get the first crack at some of these players. Now, so the winner of the East Division was the Cleveland Pipers, who won 45, and they would go on to face the winner of the West Division, the Kansas City Steers, who won 54 games that year. And they were able to have the first 2 games played in Kansas City. And they would win those first 2 games by a wide margin, winning by 25 points in the first game and 36 in the second game. Many thought the series was over as it was a 5-game series. But they headed back to Cleveland, where George Steinbrenner got his team ready, and they won the next 2 games before heading back to Kansas City. Except George Steinbrenner was mad, and he actually had the team not show up for Game 5 and had them reschedule for the next night at a college venue because he thought the game should have been played in Cleveland. But he relented and did play the next night, and the Pipers clawed their way back in a thrilling comeback to defeat the Kansas City Steers 106-102, winning the first championship and only championship in this iteration of the American Basketball League, because the American Basketball League struggled financially. If you looked at any league that started ever, they struggled their first year. They almost always lose money. It's hard to make money in this industry, especially if you don't have TV rights, which wasn't very common back in the day. So without TV deals or anything, they lost over $1 million at the time, which would be well over $10 million today. And they began the next season, and they would go on to lose $250,000, playing only half a season, as they folded halfway through the season on New Year's Eve, 1962. And the Kansas City Steers had the most wins at the time and were named the de facto championship of that season. So after losing millions of dollars, the ABL was no more. But that didn't mean George Steinbrenner would stop trying to be his team. He took this Cleveland Pipers team from an AAU team all the way to a professional team, and he was ready to try to get them into the NBA. He contacted the NBA, showing that they were a good team. They won the American Basketball League championship. They were ready to go. They had young future NBA players on their team, but sadly the NBA did not go for it, and they declined to let him merge into the league, as they didn't want to expand the league until the ABA came along, forcing their hand. So they shut down everything, and when 1963 started, players, staff, fans were shocked and had to find new opportunities. Some were able to find opportunities in the NBA or other semi-pro leagues. Others had to just end their professional careers. It was a short 2-year window, but it showed the success of the 3-point line and the scoring that it allowed. And the ABA had the 3-point line when they merged with the NBA, and when they completed the merger, they decided to add that in, as it was a good innovation for the game. And today, the NBA would be nothing without the three-point line. It has changed the game tremendously, giving us way more scoring and allowing shorter skilled guards to have great opportunities and allowed big men to step out and learn how to shoot. It's been a fun iteration of the game, and it all goes back to the American Basketball League in 1961, whose impact will always be felt on basketball due to this one rule change that will always be with the NBA. I want to thank you for listening to today's Daily Sports History. If you like this, please share this with a friend. Tell them, check out this, learn about the ABL, so you guys can be basketball historians together. And come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History.